You may have noticed that here on my channel, I believe that one of the places where the rubber meets the road in tabletop gaming, and tires really start squealing, the games that have a fuel, a fire unto themselves, are the ones that speak loudly and with a point of view. They have mechanics, they have art, they have everything added up into this totality that speaks for itself before anyone even starts playing. People make characters for these games not knowing if they're ever going to get to play them. Of course, the White Wolf games are a great example. It's interesting that I think so many folks from that first generation of gaming aren't familiar with how strongly those games spoke. So I want to introduce you today to an OSR game that I think has the perfect formula, the combination of the old school Traveler random character generation, the true brutality of some of my awesome crunchy combat mechanics that I'm so fond of, and then it has a tongue-in-cheek embrace, a full two-handed hug around the idea that I want classes, levels, and treasures. And I'll be damned if anyone's going to scold me for being a little bit immature. I'm talking, of course, about a game that I love called HackMaster 4th Edition. I'm the Complex Games apologist. So for today's disclaimer moment, I thought that I would sort of try and clarify what HackMaster 4th Edition is. It has its origin in a comic strip that was in the Dungeons & Dragons magazines back in the 90s. Jolly Blackburn kind of wrote this little thing that was chock full of reminiscence and parodies of kind of old school ways of thinking and old school ways of playing. One of the things that it poked fun at was the prose of Gary Gygax in, the first edition D&D, and kind of how thick all of his advice and his rules that he threw into AD&D were. And it's just so much fun because HackMaster has taken what originally was silly and it brought it to life as a real entity. How did this happen? Well, back in the day, Wizards of the Coast used to not be owned by Hasbro, and as 3rd edition came out, they said, I don't see much harm in you guys publishing this parody game of 1st edition. And so they gave Kenzer Company a license to produce this game. And it contains almost all of the mechanics of 1st edition AD&D, with a lot of extra special sauce. So yes, HackMaster is a game where you are strongly encouraged to roll 3d6 down the line, where you play a minigame that's not unlike the Traveler minigame for character generation, to kind of get a lot of detail and flavor, to be told a lot about who your character is, so you have things to roleplay. Yes, it is something where you roll d20s to attack, and there's an attack matrix that the GM is supposed to take care of. We use Thacker at my table. And yes, it is a D&D game, but what are the other ingredients? What are the other sources of inspiration that I think really power this game and make it so much fun? Well, I think that HackMaster has hidden behind its pages a little bit of good old Rollmaster, and I think that it also has a little bit of the interesting point-based character generation, the give and take of my good friend GURPS 3rd edition, and it has a lot of modern game design, of trying to create outcomes by structuring the mechanics within the game towards success. It does this all with a tongue-in-cheek, written in 1979 style prose. It doesn't think it's great if you're reading it, but it is. And I hope on this channel that we're going to delve into it. For now, I want to just leaf through the pages of the HackMaster 4th Edition PHB and let it speak for itself, just for a moment. This is the extensive spellbook, which is full of really compelling and interesting descriptions that are lengthy. Because as you know, as Dungeons & Dragons was maturing in the 70s, there was a lot of open interpretation, and when it came to organized play at things like tournaments, Gary thought that there was too much unevenness, and so that's why he filled up AD&D with all this stuff. But me, coming at it as a young person, when I was 19 years old, this was a manual. This was a Talmud. It was a sum total of so much experience and so much hilarity in some cases. They're fine with being silly in these descriptions. Hurl Small Animal is an excellent spell for a necromancer to begin to play with. You've just gotta love it. There's also some really excellent art in here that echoes Larry Elmore's kind of somewhat There's also a fair amount of parody of the lethality of OD&D and how characters had very few hit points. Here's an illustration of a man chopping his own hand off, and the assumption is that that's going to occur during actual play. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's a lot of danger, and I think that comes from a lot of really interesting subsystems in the combat. And I find it so playable. Vis-a-vis things like Rolemaster, vis-a-vis things like, say, GURPS, this is a combat system that has a lot of flavor and detail that comes at me, but it is manageable, and me just behind the screen can take care of 99% of it. I don't need to actually educate my players. They can play and almost do most of the same things that they would do if they were playing this game. But this game gives us lots of ideas shooting right back at us, and it gives us really unique characters. One of the awesome mechanics that really motivates, I think, in-character behavior that's a part of this game is the honor system. You are motivated by your class, your level, and your alignment to try and do things that are part of those archetypes. And as you move through a session, you collect temporal honor points, and these are like little tokens that you could use to get honor dice, or you can accumulate them into sort of your personal honor, which grows over time, and you have to keep track of and make sure that it's appropriate to your level. Otherwise, you are a boastful braggart that the gods are trying to get killed by chance. Or you could be an optimal paragon of what an adventurer of your level ought to be. It all depends on how you behave and how honorable you are vis-a-vis your alignment and your class and your level. And you can get pretty creative about how to get some of these points and how to use them. One of my favorite examples is that entering into combat without armor and shield nets you 5 temporal honor points, which is halfway towards getting an honor die. Use a couple of the interesting and unique combat maneuvers that are available in this system, and you're now all the way to getting an extra bonus die. These dice are added to attack rolls and to damage rolls. They are a way to save yourself from a mild and long-dragging combat. And also, your honor is a way to save your character's life from save or die. You can do something called an honor purge and turn the clock back just enough to not die. But then you are literally sitting in the dumps. You have 10% of the honor that you had before. You've got to claw your way back up and be a paragon that much more, or your character is going to become an unplayable NPC. This is some interesting stuff, and I love it, because the existential fight to die or live as a character is expanded into to be or not to be.
I do not know why I should fear death. I, who have died twice, and am still alive, yet I have the same horror of it as you who have never died, and it is because of this terror of death that I am so convinced of my mortality.
There's so much in this book, and it took me years to unravel how to teach it, and I hope to share it with you here on the channel, because I think this is a beautiful and really fun game. But for now, I think we should leaf through a few pages of the character generation system so that you see how much is on tap, and how it really parallels how much richness in character you get from Traveler. Here are the quirks and flaws tables. There's a little bit of a mini-game system at play where you can do things like say, I'm going to roll for 4 quirks and flaws. These tables can spawn further flaws. You can end up being a double amputee with a lisp if you're not careful, but you can spend building points to re-roll out of those tables. How you emerge from that process of character generation and how many building points you have to purchase talents, skills, and other sundries is really where the minigame lies. And at the end of that process, you get a very interesting character. I will refer you to a video where I chatted with my wife about her Pixie Fairy Enchanter, a really interesting and iconic member of our campaigns over the years. So HackMaster is not a game that's trying to be like other games. It is a member of the OSR United Nations, or I hope to convince you that it ought to be accepted. But it is not like the others, because it is not D&D. It is a game that acknowledges the other games that sat alongside Dungeons & Dragons through the 80s. And as I arrived in the hobby as a young child in the 90s, all these games were on the shelves. I started with GURPS, and I came to D&D later. And I had to really understand and grok the long legacy that Gary left behind and what TSR had created. And I did that from a perspective as a guy who had grown up in the miniatures wargaming hobby. I hadn't done a great deal of role-playing, and neither did my dad, until I was something like 16 or 17. And I had to invent this all for myself. And I had to do so in a way that was fun. And that manual for how to have fun, while also being a game master, wrangling people together to make campaigns happen, well, there's so much positive attitude in this book. And there's an incredible system that fuels campaign play. Character death is on the horizon, but so are amazing heroics with HackMaster 4th edition. I hope to talk to you more about it. I'm the Complex Games Apologist.
Thank you for checking out my channel. If you enjoyed what you've seen here, maybe check out one of my in-depth video essays on topics in the tabletop gaming world, or subscribe with alerts so that you get updated anytime I put up new content here on YouTube. And above all, let me know what you think about this topic and about my videos in general by leaving a like or a dislike, and especially your own opinions in the comments below.